All right, welcome back from a brief little hiatus. The podcast listeners that listen to this before the draft are going to be going through like some crazy whiplash because I'm not going to edit the break out. I don't have the time to do it today, so they're going to just be like, are going to be like, all right, we're stopping and taking a break, and then we're going to slam right back into, we're doing this again. I'm going to wait half a beat for Stone to get this link tweeted out so we can get a viewer or two in here. We were doing a little bit okay there at the end of that last one, but we're going to talk about a few more guys, and then we're also going to do some draft predictions. We're going to talk Stone and I every year, through our sources or however you want to put it. We'll make some bets on who we think might go where. A little bit of a mock, you could say, even though we're not as invested as the Kristen Peaks of the world. I'm choosing violence today, so it's the end of the cycle. I'm not getting a job in the league this year, so
you know what I will say. You will next year though, but you know what I will say is it was really cool to see a guy that I know me and Coop we met at Summer League and we've been interacted with. I assume you know him fairly well with Ryan Hammer. He was doing the NBA interviews. That was really cool. We've known Ryan for a little while. He's always been cool to us. It was cool to see him get that opportunity, and I thought it was pretty insightful. Like for me personally, like I watch a lot of film. I don't spend a lot of time watching interviews, and this was for a lot of these guys my first time watching them actually talk and hearing them speak and it doesn't mean everything how they answer a 5-minute interview, but I do think it matters some, especially if you're predicting where they're going to go. But obviously, off the court stuff matters a ton. We just don't necessarily have the access to a lot of that stuff. But having that little bit of insight, I think, does give you kind of a glimpse of who a player kind of is as a person. Not that it's that the end all be all by any means, but that was a cool opportunity to hear them speak, but also see Ryan get that opportunity to ask them questions.
Absolutely, Ryan Hammer, one of the goats of all time, and just absolutely the type of guy I'm always rooting for. Stone, I'm sure you got that tweeted out, and we'll do all our stuff. But who is the first guy on your list that we got to talk about, that you got to get your thoughts out on before the draft hits?
I'll say Chucky Hepburn because it's a lot of people's favorite guy that we probably haven't talked about yet. So and he's got a fantastic name. I would say all first team name in this draft. Chucky's been a guy that like I've been sort of cautiously viewing. I've been monitoring and tracking a little bit throughout his career. Really interesting at Wisconsin, just as a shooter and scorer. Obviously, took a massive leap and roll this year with Louisville. Listed at 6'2". I'd say that's a little generous given the hair, but the sell with Chucky is just that he's a chucker. He's a Chucky. Hepburn is a chucker, and I think that the sell is that he can really shoot it, right? Like this guy can really get flaming hot at certain points, just be an absolute flamethrower from three. Very comfortable drifting as a shooter, comfortable stepping into shots, comfortable stepping back from shots. Doesn't need a ton of space to really get an efficient shot. He's really good at operating in tight windows as a shooter, which I think is interesting. That's the sell here with Chucky. I don't think there's much else. I don't think he's really getting downhill on his own a lot in the NBA. Although there's some games like throughout the season he was getting at the free throw line like 20, 17, 18 times, like just a ton of times at a free throw rate. I don't think that's NBA real, but I do think that the thing with Chucky is that he can shoot, right? I don't think he's a great passer. I think he's a pretty inaccurate passer, in all honesty. Like it doesn't make a ton of bad reads, but the accuracy is just too poor, I think, to be an NBA guy to have his ball in his hands a lot. But if he can really shoot it and be this guy that gets super hot from three off the bench, like I see the appeal when I squint that a lot of people have him, in their draftable range. So do you have any thoughts on Chucky?
Yeah, so for what it's worth, is about 6'1" in shoes, 6'1.5" without shoes. But he does have a 6'4.5", wingspan. So he wouldn't be like the smallest guard in the NBA by any means. Like you said, the sell for the longest time has been the off the dribble shooting, his ability to make pull ups. But I think for me, actually, the real sell is that he figured out how to be much more of like a driver and a true point guard this season at Louisville. He played a lot more with the ball in his hands. He got to the rim way more. He shot 63.1% on close twos, which is far and away the best he's ever shot in his career. And he also had a 50% free throw rate this year. He was really, really effective as a downhill driver this year. I think for me, the real sell is actually less the off the dribble shooting, and it's more the bag, you could say, right? Like, I just think he's a really effective ball handler in terms of he just has a lot of moves that he can use to create small advantages, and he's pretty efficient at exploiting them. For what it's worth, for some stats, he did take 131 off the dribble jumpers this year, only 40.5 effective field goal rate, which is not good, but he did shoot a little better, 55% effective field goal rate on 111 catch and shoot shots. Didn't take many runners, but was just really efficient at the rim for someone this small. 59.3% at the rim for someone this tiny. And in the half court, that didn't take, like a gigantic step down. It took a little step down, but not like a gigantic one. That's a good enough sign for me to think there's some, improvement right there, right? That he's gotten better. I just think he's still probably not good enough of an athlete and not a good enough passer to really be super intriguing. But I'd probably give him a two-way. I think this is a guy that is, worth keeping in mind as like the type of guy that could develop into a worthwhile backup guard, because he can run pick and roll. He could have enough scoring gravity. He's just really crafty, right? Like, he's kind of the dime store, or maybe the old version of Jeremiah Fears, where it's like he just really has a kind of special handle in a way that is really intriguing, even if the rest of his game to me is kind of a question. But I like the improvement rate. I like that he got better playing under a better coach, in my opinion, at least a better offensive coach in Pat Kelsey. He improved, and I think that's valuable and worthwhile. So wouldn't draft him super high. I wouldn't draft him at all, really. 65 on my board. He's an undrafted two-way guy, but I would probably give him a two-way. Stone, who you got next?
And for what it's worth, he's 67th on my board, and he's, for me, more of like a priority summer league guy. But I do think like he's got the ability to carve out a pretty successful role overseas. Who do I have next? Who do I want to go with here? I'll go with a similar player because it'll be super quick. We could spend little to no time, and if you don't have any thoughts, that's totally fine. I'll go with Ty Berry here, who I watched out of Northwestern. To me, the sell again is really shooting. I think there's off the dribble stuff. I think there's a lot of interesting D-cell stuff coming off of screens where he got into a shot really quickly. Good relocation shooter, good spot up guy. I don't think he's doing a ton off the dribble. I don't think he's doing a ton else on the court, if I'm being honest. Like, the handles nowhere near Chucky Hepburn's. The finishing isn't good. I don't think he offers much more to an NBA team. We're kind of going rapid fire here, but that's the quick sell. Where I ended up with Ty Berry, I had him 95th on my board as a possible summer league guy. But I think there's room for – why am I talking about the 95th guy on my board? Because I think there's room, for him to potentially be someone that does actually get a two-way and can be one of those two-way guys that is like a three-point specialist and has a little bit of a useful role on that sort of contract. I don't particularly buy him a ton. I don't think the gap between him and Chaz Lanier is that massive, though, like as similar what value that they provide. But I think he's got like a overseas sort of career that he could carve out. Again, more of a possible summer league guy for me. I wouldn't be a priority guy for me, but it is what it is. Just a quick name to throw out there. Do you have anybody to throw out there, Bryce?
No, on Ty Berry, I'll just say purely spreadsheet scouting here, but I do think that it's at least a little bit interesting that he has kind of built his game entirely on that shooting, and Playing for Northwestern. That is, something worthwhile. And I think actually you mentioned like you think the path might be overseas. I actually think that profile looks much more like a G League guy, kind of in the mold of, do you remember Bryce Brown from Auburn, who stuck around in the G League for a while because, the G League is, in some ways, in terms of how rosters are built, lots of times it's you want guys who can really fit and run some of the actions your NBA team runs, but are just worse. So if you have like, a 6'6", 6'7" movement shooter on your NBA team, and you want your two-way big that you're invested in developing the DHO game with that guy to have some practice doing that, you might take a Ty Berry on your G League team and develop him that way. So I don't have any thoughts on outside of that, but I do want to ask you about one Seattleite, Nolan Hickman, 6'3.5" with shoes on, 6'7" wingspan. He's a May 7, 2003 birthday. He's 22 years old. His rookie season will be his age 22 season. Has never really lived up to. He was like a top 25 guy in RSCI. He's never really lived up to that. He probably should have left after last year, where he averaged 14 points and 2.7 assists on 47, 41, 88.3 shooting splits. This year, the efficiency went up a little bit, but the actual scoring went down. The last 2 years he's been really efficient. This year, 62.7% true shooting. The year before, 59.6. But he's always really underplayed in terms of the skill stats you would want and the athleticism stats. He's dunked twice in his 4-year college career. Never taken more than 79 close twos. He's just never really popped in the way I think so many of us wanted him to. I remember I played against Nolan Hickman a couple times, and it was like, we thought he was like the best ball handler of all time. Like, we thought he was the next Allen Iverson. When he committed to Kentucky, there were people who thought he was a one and done, right? That he would be in the league the next year. And obviously that hasn't quite happened, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on it. So is Nolan Hickman someone that still intrigues you?
Not anymore, as much as I wish he was. I was super in on him a couple years ago. That's, slowly waned. I was one of those people that probably would have been able to put him in my top 25 way back when. Nowadays, not so much the case. He still has flashes of like great touch, especially on the runners and floaters. I think that's improved actually throughout his collegiate career. Shoots really well off the catch. There's like some slight movement equity there. Probably the worst rebounder in this entire class, if I'm being honest. Like, just absolutely no rebounding equity. Gets pushed around a lot. Doesn't have the frame to really add a lot of muscle to counter that. I think he is a pretty versatile finisher. It just gets negated pretty quickly by the fact that he's not super explosive around the rim. So not someone I'm into, and just hasn't developed in a meaningful enough way for me to buy him as an NBA player as much as I wish he was. I think he ended up in totality. I can't find the exact spot right now, but if I remember correctly, like in the 80s on my big board, as a guy that I would invite to my summer league team, but I'm not overly thrilled about his NBA opportunities.
Yeah, there's things I really still love about Hickman. I think his change of pace as a ball handler is like elite, but he just doesn't have like that top end athletic gear, and that's a huge issue, right? If you can't really turn the jets on, then that pace doesn't matter as much, especially because he's not like a great off the dribble shooter. He really struggles to make off the dribble shots from three specifically. In the mid range, he's a little better, but he's efficient. I think he'll probably be a fine. He's not like a top Euro level player, but he could probably be a fine overseas player. But even like G League is probably a bit of a stretch. I can't get all the way out on him. I actually kind of prefer him, in his NBA translation to Ryan Nembhard, because I just think, it's more likely that this guy is like a really good pick and roll player in the NBA because he has the scoring and the pace aspect of it down than Ryan Nembhard is a good pick and roll player in the NBA. So, but they're both, fairly similar to me. Who you got next, Stone?
Okay. I'm gonna butcher his name. I'm completely sorry. I'm sure he's listening, so I don't want this to be the first and last time he listens to our podcast. But Obina Anochili Killen, Hopefully, I got close. Played out of Marshall. I think he was listed around like 6'7". Real interesting stat profile when I looked, and I watched a couple of his games. Really good defensive positioning. I think the big sell for him is the defense. He's got pretty decent length. That wasn't crazy, and the athleticism is an outlier for him to really be a specialist in that regard. Even though that's what he was kind of at Marshall. Like he's just. I think the sell for him is defensive specialist, but I don't think he gets to the thresholds of like crazy length and athleticism to make that happen in the NBA. He is really disciplined as a rim protector, like really disciplined, times things very well, is not biting or jumping at things too much. Offensively, has some pretty interesting stuff with cutters from like a post up position as a passer, but he has pretty poor touch around the rim. I don't think is going to be a very efficient finisher. And if you are sort of this rim protection specialist, I just think you need more defensively to be able to anchor yourself in that sort of role. So I have him, I believe, 86th on my board, or 82nd on my board, excuse me. Big difference. That as a priority summer league guy, who I would definitely want on my team. I think can provide defensive value. Could carve out a role probably. I would say more in like Greece or potentially Italy, but not somebody that I view as a strong NBA upside kind of guy.
Yeah, this was the next guy on my list that I didn't quite get to. 6'7" and 3/4 with shoes, so you probably squint and say 6'8", 7'4" wingspan, 8'11" standing reach, undersized for a 5, but that's definitely his position. The reason that I really wanted to get to him: 13.3 block rate, 25 dunks, 73% on close twos, 43.1% on 102 long twos, and then he also made his free throws at like a non-hacker rate, right? 55.2 free throw rate. There's some stuff here, but yeah, he's just really underskilled for who he is. What I liked in general is that just playing at Marshall, Marshall runs a pretty fun offensive scheme that tends to take, even from their bigs, take at least a little bit of ability to read and react. And obviously that block rate is just insane. But yeah, I didn't get to him, and sadly he's probably sub NBA. But this is of all the guys I didn't get a scout. This is the one I'm going to root for, from Lagos, Nigeria. Just a really fun, consistent improvement track record too, which is always fun to see. So, Stone, who's your next guy?
Yeah, I'll go with someone I remember PD Webb pointed out years ago for us, Cam Hildreth. The second, I believe, second British guy we've talked about this cycle on the podcast. He is just a really great shooter. I think off the dribble, especially. I think the ball handling is good enough at an NBA level. Actually, like I think there's some ability to get himself downhill. The problem that prevents me from viewing Cam all the way as a draftable guy or NBA guy is he's just out of control way too often as a downhill driver. I think he lacks a plan a lot of the time. He just doesn't know exactly what he wants to do when he gets downhill, and I don't think has the tools to really make the downhill driving, despite the fact that he can get down there. I don't think he can make it really worth it to be able to consistently do that, if it makes sense. I know that's a real wordy way of phrasing that. But I think the shooting's good off the dribble. I think, like we talked about with Javon Swell, there's actually some lateral equity there as a shooter where he creates some decent separation in that way. On side steps or step backs, kind of think Yakachonis, if you recall. And I think there's the shooting there is interesting. He's not much of a connective guy. I think he lacks too much connective equity to really thrive in this role. But, if you can create your own shot off the dribble as a shooter and you're bigger than, say, a Chucky Hepburn, I believe he was like 6'4", there's some interest there. I have him as a priority summer league guy. I believe he is 68th on my board. Maybe this is a guy that you get on your summer league team, and he can potentially carve out a role on your as a two-way guy. But I think more than likely this is an overseas player somewhere in Europe and carves out a decent role in that sort of mold.
Yeah, I don't think he just ever improved enough for me. I mean, Kildreth has been on my radar for a long time, and he's a guy I've been rooting for. The NBA doesn't have enough Brits, but yeah, he just I didn't do a full scout on him this year. He just never got good enough. The truth, he biggest thing again, stat line scouting here, spreadsheet scouting. You can't be like a pull-up shooter and have taken less than 100 threes. While playing 81% of your team's minutes, 5.3% 3-point, not 5.3%, excuse me, 5.3 3-point attempts per 100 possessions is just not good enough. It doesn't get up enough. The next guy I want to throw at you, Stone, that I'm pretty sure you watched is Chris Magnon. And this is an interesting one because he didn't, as far as I could tell, didn't measure at any of the combines or anything. And I don't even know like what his goals are in terms of like, is he even trying to play, professional basketball? I don't know. I tweeted about Stevie Mitchell the other day because I was like, man, I kind of like Stevie Mitchell a little bit. And then he just like, oh yeah, he's just going to go work in corporate America now. So, I mean, good for him. I don't blame him. But, Chris Magnon, here's the sell. 6.4 block rate, 5.3 steal rate is like a 6'4", 6'5" guy. Dunked 14 times in the previous 3 years. He had always had his lowest in his career. His lowest steal rate is 5.2. His lowest block rate is 2.1. He's always been just a defensive menace. Creates a ton of havoc on that end. I think the hand-eye coordination defensively is like maybe like a top 10 individual skill in this class. Just he has crazy hand-eye coordination, crazy ability to get a finger on the ball. Really good instincts in terms of making breaks on the ball too, as like a rebounder as well, but especially on steals and blocks. He's kind of undisciplined defensively. I actually don't think he's particularly good guarding on the ball. Like he's pretty good at taking someone away, making sure they can't catch, but he's not good at like just staying in front of them one-on-one. He gives up angles. He's a little bit too over aggressive trying to get steals and such. But your hope is that, hey, there's obvious instincts with great hands here that project that this can be like a really high-level defender. People are going to compare him to like Alex Caruso. I actually don't think that's the sell. I think the sell is Matisse Thybulle. And obviously people are going to hear that and be like, well, how valuable is Matisse Thybulle? I think it's hard to say in some ways because he's on a team that doesn't value his skill set right now. This is a guy who's very specific, and he's an awful offensive player. Like there is nothing here offensively other than he could kind of dunk in transition. He's an okay cutter just because teams don't pay any attention to him. Like he's not just going to stand out there. He'll be active enough as a cutter. But the motor plus kind of just feel for creating havoc and creating possessions, like I think there's a path to like a potential bench role here maybe. Stone, where did you fall with Mannion?
Yeah, I think with Mannion, I think he's a good cutter, a good screener. I do think he's a pretty interesting finisher. He's really versatile around the rim. Like he has in-air adjustments that he does really well. I don't think he's a great ball handler. Okay, extra pass guy, but not like a super strong connective player. Defensively, I don't have a ton to add. The value for me is like the pathway for me is almost somewhat similar to like an Andre Jackson Jr. that we talked about. He's just not the athlete or the ball handler that Jackson Jr. was. So that obviously is a big separator between those two. Not that I would never comp, but I think that's the pathway of like, can this guy do enough offensively to make the defense worthwhile? But I don't think he's like an elite level defender despite the numbers to be there. He is interesting. Like he's got some funk. He's not a complete nothing as a ball handler. There's times where he can just get himself to the rim on a straight line drive. And he's pretty big and long against opposing guards for whatever that is worth. I think I ended up overall with with him at 57th on my board as like a possible guy I would maybe give a 2A to. He wouldn't be the first guy I'm calling up, but I think there's, depending on the team, maybe a role for him where a couple injuries go down and you kind of see what you have in him as a spot rotational guy, and maybe there's enough for him to reach that barrier threshold offensively to stick. So that there's a slight chance, and that's why I would maybe consider giving him a 2A.
Yeah, for me, I'd probably give him a 2A just because I think in some ways you should use a 2A on someone like this. Like, he just has like a ridiculous individual skill. The rest of his game is bad. Like, he is not he's probably even a borderline non D1 basketball player if it wasn't for the fact that he can just create a crazy amount of havoc, and he has obviously good instincts. I think he probably can be a little bit better on the ball. He's clearly been empowered to just do bullshit like defensively on the ball because he wants to create steals and such. He probably can, lock that down a little bit better and I think he's like quite like a lockdown guy. He's not that athletic in terms of like his lateral first step or anything. He just has incredible hands. Like that's really what it is, and hand-eye coordination and just a great feel for what the ball is. And he's pretty good at like reading ball handlers. His digs are incredible, right? He has great two-hand digs. These types of defenders are not generally, to me, the most valuable in the UVA, but I probably give him a 2A just because I want to see, like, this is like a special skill. He took 33 total jump shots this year. He's just not like a shooter at all right now. Do you have a shooting coach that could completely rebuild it in 1 year while he's in the G League? I don't know. That's maybe part of the sell too. Like, he's a long ways away probably, but the special skill is special enough that I'd take a chance on it. And either way, he'd be a fun G League guy because the G League, is super undisciplined. There's a ton of turnovers, and he'd probably average like 8 steals a game in the G League. So it'd at least be a fun time. Stone, who you got next? Who you want to discuss here?
Yeah, I'll go with Kaderi Richmond here, out of St. Joe's. Lacks
The other one, St. John's.
St. John's. You know what? I went slow, hoping you would correct me. I flip them back and forth in my head. I don't know. Maybe I have dyslexia or something. But he lacks a lot of explosion as a driver. I think that's the big thing is just I don't know if he meets the athletic threshold as like a run and jump guy. He's pretty much consistently below the rim. I should mention too, he's like a 6'6" guard. I don't usually introduce players, so I'm still getting the feel for it. He's like a 6'6" guard. I don't know how much he weighs, but he looks like he's like 240. Massive, super strong. He just can't shoot. Like the release is slow. I don't have much optimism that the touch will ever come around to an NBA level. I think the way he carves out a role is not going to be dependent on his shooting. It's going to be dependent on, is he good enough at everything else to really stick? He is a pretty decent ball handler. He's just really slow to get downhill. Like he can navigate things pretty well. It's just his body doesn't move at the pace you want it to be able to exploit a lot of things. I think he's a good defender. I don't think he's a great defender, but he is good on ball. He's really decisive with the ball in his hands, which I like. And he's super scrappy. So similar in the way that we talked about Mannion, like maybe he's just good enough to get there. But I think Kaderi for me is just better at it's a lot of things as a defender on ball, as a ball handler, as someone that can create second chance opportunities around the rim as a rebounder. Like there's a lot of interesting things there with Kaderi. He was supposed to be a one and done, I think, way back when. Hasn't really ended up that way for him, but I do think there's a possible maybe NBA pathway for him. It's just the question of does he meet that threshold athletically? I don't know, but he's good enough at everything else. So I ended up with him as 55 on my board as a possible two-way guy, just slightly above Mannion. But there's I think potential there for him to carve an NBA rollout possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to like Kadari, right? 6'4" and a quarter without shoes, so 6'5" with a 6'9.5" wingspan. Has always been productive. This year on a really good St. John's team, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 2 steals, basically a block, 2 turnovers, 48.7, 17.5, 53.6 shooting splits. He only took 40 total threes and just shot awful, 53% from the free throw line. Now he shot better. Like his career totals from the free throw line is 70% on 505. Like that's an okay number. Do I 30.7% from three on 215 total attempts is not like as bad as his number looked this year, but it's definitely a bad sign that it's gotten worse, right? Like that's not exactly promising. There's a lot of stuff to love with Kadari. I think he is that level of defender potentially. He's really strong. He moves his feet super well. Really reactive and instinctive without being much of a gambler. He gets through screens really well. He reminds me some of Chris Dunn defensively. I don't think he's quite that level of like athlete that Chris Dunn is. It's probably not quite as long too, if I remember correctly. But I mean, the sell is in some ways, well, can he be Chris Dunn? And there is at a certain point you're questioning, well, how worthwhile is that as a draft guy? I mean, Chris Dunn is basically as good as you can be as a guard defender while, still being a fairly negative offensive player. Like Kadari is a worse shooter than Dunn was, especially in terms of his form. Someone mentioned it, but there's like a really bad hitch. He just kind of hangs in the air a lot. Really focused on the mid-range right now. He's a below the rim finisher. Now I do think he could be a better finisher than he got to show. The St. John's spacing was really awful, but he's never particularly been a good finisher. Like he's the most he's ever dunked in a season is 7 times. He's had multiple seasons where he's shot in the 40s at rim on close twos. Like I really want to like Kadari Richmond. I think the defense is that good, and there's only so far like I would let him fall. Like I would give him a 2-way for sure, and I'd probably even draft him to get him on a 2-way because I also like I think the transition pushing is really good. I think he's a pretty good rebounder. He's not like a great passer, but he's a good one, and he's a really good decision maker. But yeah, he's not a crazy athlete. He's a pretty awful shooter, and teams guarded him consistently by just sticking a guy in the paint like he was Ben Simmons. It's really hard to be an NBA player who's going to put the ball in his hands if the other team is going to guard you like that. Like that's a tough thing to stomach. So I like Kadari. He's at 58 on my board. He is my favorite player from that St. John's team. I prefer him to Mannion for sure, but I can only get so high. Like here's a question, Stone. Do you prefer him or do you prefer Elijah Martin from
Florida? I think I have Martin higher a little bit. Yeah, but I think
fair enough. Sorry, yeah, no. I mean, I'm the same way. Like I prefer Martin a little bit. Like even though I think
actually
Kadari is like a better basketball player, but it's just Martin has a better chance to make shots and like as a bet at a pretty similar type of player. Like I just that's kind of the issue. Not that they're similar offense. They're very very different offensively, but defensively I think they're a bet at the same kind of thing, and I think Elijah Martin has much more of a chance to stick offensively. So even if I think Kadari is a better defensive player, your offense matters for your ability to get on the floor defensively. And I just think the offense might be too damaging for Kadari, sadly.
I actually take that back. On my board, I have Kadari 55 and Martin 56. So I guess I did or do prefer Richmond, but they're right there. They're next to each other. But they're both, I would maybe give them a 2-way. So
yeah, fair enough. Who you got next, Stone? I have a couple guys we can get to, but your list is a little bit longer than mine. So
yeah, I'll try and speed up a little bit. Hunter Salas is the highest ranked guy we'll talk about today for me personally. I have him 45th on my board as a priority 2-way guy. Someone I've liked throughout the end of his high school career coming into college. Since then, my fandom, I've always rooted for him, but my like of him as a prospect has gone up and down quite a bit. This year, he's been on Draft Raiders for a while, 6'5" guard out of Wake Forest. Obviously, previously played with Nolan Hickman, and then this year with Cam Hildreth. The sell for him is that maybe he's just versatile enough as a scorer to make it work in the NBA. And defensively, I think he's actually made some pretty big strides throughout his collegiate career. The handle is pretty controlled. He just doesn't create a ton of separation with it. Somewhat similar to a Javon Small. I don't think it's quite to that level, but it's. I think he has this sort of similar parallels of the same pros and cons of it. He hasn't put on enough upper body strength throughout his time in college for what I would prefer, especially as a finisher. Like, I think he takes a lot of hits to the chest as a finisher, can't finish through them in the way that I want, especially as a senior. The shooting has wavered. Last year, I bought it being serviceable after he shot 40% from three. This year, it took a pretty big hit and returned back to what it has previously been in his smaller roles in college. It was down at 28%. Probably should have just come out after the season he had last year, to be honest. But the sell is like he has some off the dribble stuff. He has some off the catch stuff as a shooter. He can get downhill, not on his own, but can be a pretty decent straight line driver. Gets off of one for some pretty monstrous dunks. Can maybe draw free throws if he can get the rotations right and time his drives right against the shot blocker. So there's some scoring versatility here with him, and defensively, like, I think his hands have gotten a lot better. He's not out of position quite as much as he used to be, but the sell is really the offense with him. I don't think he's a good connective passer. I don't think that he has a lot of the connective tissue you would hope for, but I think as a secondary guy who's more of a play finisher at the next level, there's some interest here. And like I said, he's a priority two-way guy for me who almost just missed the cut as firmly draftable.
Yeah, my argument with Salas is just as another guy who I just don't think has gotten better enough consistently. I understand why some people are into him, and his junior season at Wake Forest was great. I mean, he like you said, he should have just left after last year. He's always scored a good amount when he's played. Obviously, his first years at Gonzaga, he really struggled to get on the floor. But I think the shooting is too inconsistent. I think the defense is pretty bad. Like, for a guy like this, like, I don't want to really buy the defense as being a part of the sell. And I've never particularly enjoyed Salas as a defender. So I didn't rank him. I didn't do a full scout. So I hope I'm wrong, but that's kind of my takeaway. Go ahead and do one more stone, and then we'll jump into kind of my next guy.
Gotcha. Let's go with Eli Ndiaye. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but he popped onto a lot of people's radars last year. Played with Hugo Gonzalez this year at Real. 6'7", I think I want to say, like power forward / center. The thing with Ndiaye is he is a shooting specialist who's an inconsistent shooter. So that is sort of the difficult part there. And defensively, he's got the frame, the body that you would think, this is someone that can really be impactful on that end of the court. And I think there are times where he's in the right place at the right time and he sees the right things at the right time rotationally. But he's sort of a tweener in the worst way on that end, where he's too small against a lot of opposing bigs and just too slow on the perimeter against a lot of opposing wings and forwards. And it's difficult, I think, at an NBA level to exist in that sort of context when you don't really have a place you fit in on that end of the court. Like, even if you see the right things, it doesn't really matter all that much if you're not able to consistently get there. So, I think with more shooting adjustments and the form looks pretty mechanically atrocious. Like, he changes his form a lot. He's got somewhat of a weird shoulder movement that he throws in there where he sort of like twists his shoulder almost when he puts his shot up, his right shoulder. So I'm not super into Ndiaye, but there's a lot of people that talk about him. So I figured we should give him a little love here at the end of the cycle. I had him 88th on my board as like a possible summer league guy. I think more than likely he just stays in Europe and continues to develop and hopefully into a pretty good player. But I don't really foresee a lot of NBA opportunities for him.
Yep, no thoughts other than when we watched him with Ugo, he did not stand out to me much at all. So just not really a guy for me. I hope he has a really successful pro career and all that fun stuff. All right, let's talk about Kobe Johnson from UCLA this year. Measured 6'5.5" in shoes, which is a huge worry. 6'6", 8'4.5", standing reach, 6'8.5" wingspan are good enough numbers. He will have to play the 3 in the NBA. I think there were some people who thought he could maybe be like a 3-4. He'd be really undersized as a 4. I do think like measurements are at least somewhat similar to like a Royce O'Neal type. He's actually a little taller. This is the second brother we're talking about. This is the younger brother of Jalen Johnson. Did Jalen Johnson make the All-Star game last year, or was it just close to making the All-Star? I can't remember, but he's at least the younger brother of at least an almost NBA All-Star.
I don't think he did, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kobe played 3 years at USC before transferring to UCLA, and I really liked him last year. I thought he should have explored the draft waters a little bit more a little bit more last year on playing with that team with Bronny and Isaiah Collier. The biggest question is just the jumpers never come around to being efficient, right? Like even this year when he shot an okay percentage, 37.5, he only took 64. He's just never taken enough jump shots and been efficient at them. And this year the UCLA team was really good. He made an awful decision to transfer. And obviously it's not his fault, right? That Andy Enfield left, and I'm not saying like anything, but he chose the wrong program for his skill set. He is the type of guy that needs to be on a team that wants to get out and run a little bit and where he can create some havoc defensively. And he wasn't on that. So his numbers got really muted. He only had a 10% usage rate, which is just atrocious. He was efficient, at least. He shot really well when he did shoot, but he just didn't shoot very much. His historically good steal rates, at USC, he had a 4.4, 4.1, and then he did have a 3.4 this year, but it wasn't crazy good. I should say 60% usage. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. But he just has never quite been efficient enough or high enough volume, playmaker or scorer. Like offensively, there's a huge question. But I do think he's a legitimately really good defender. I think he can be really effective at the nail. He makes really good low man rotations. He's not like a lockdown guy, which again is kind of the concern, right? Who does he actually guard in the NBA to take advantage of his defense? I'm not sure. But I think he's a good defender. I think he's a good transition passer. He's just, the jumper has its moments, but he's just probably not quite good enough at anything. But because of his size and kind of overall feel, like I would probably give him a 2-way. He's kind of my top undrafted 2-way guy right now at 53 on my board. I'm not crazy high on him. Again, there's plenty of questions, but this is the type of guy that I want on a 2-way because, one, I think he can play some minutes in the regular season. And then at the end of his basketball or at the end of his 2-way, if he's developed enough, this is the type of guy that could play playoff minutes, right? If the jumper does come around enough and he continues to improve defensively, that's someone who plays playoff minutes. So, Stone, what are your thoughts on Kobe Johnson?
Yeah, he doesn't meet the shooting threshold that I want. Like, I don't think he's a good enough shooter or a good enough defender for me to really latch on to him. I think he's fine defensively. I don't think he's too much above average. Like, I think that he's way more undersized than you would think. Like, if you just saw a photo of Kobe Johnson, you'd think this dude's like 6'8", 6'9", with how big his shoulders are and stuff. But he's small, and he kind of plays small, to be honest. Like, he's, despite being a power forward, like on the perimeter is not taking a lot of lateral reaches one way or the other. I don't think he extends very far around the rim as a finisher. He, as a passer, like you can tell, and I don't really know how to describe this other than the fact that we've watched a lot of basketball over the years, and that's not meant to sound pretentious or anything, but it's just kind of the truth. But you can tell that he sees a lot of things as a passer. And again, I don't know how to explain that other than the fact that I just kind of know from watching basketball. But he sees a lot of things, but he can't execute them to a level that makes it worth it. Like I think he does process things as a passer, but the accuracy is pretty bad, and a lot of times he's just not the level of passer to make the kinds of passes to get them there delivery wise in the way that is accessible. So I'm not super in on Kobe Johnson overall. Like if I could buy into the shooting being pretty good or the defense being pretty good as opposed to maybe average, I'd be a lot more in on him. I think I ended up with him overall on my board at um, I'm stalling for a second. Not that people care, but I think he's like somewhere around the 80s for me as like a possible summer league guy. 84th as a priority summer league guy. Excuse me. And I'd want him on my summer league team, but probably wouldn't give him a 2-way.
Yeah, let's move on to the other Kobe. And this is someone who I think the sell for is really interesting. I'm surprised I haven't seen him talked about higher. That's Kobe Sanders. Sanders measured at the NBA Combine 6'7" without shoes, so pretty real 6'8". 6'8" in quarter wingspan is nothing crazy. 8'7" standing reach. He's pretty good kind of 3 size, right? He's a real wing. But he is sort of in that point forward mold that so many people fall in love with. He's a little bit older, May 30th, 2002 birthday. His rookie season will be his age 23 season. But at Nevada this year, 15.8 points, 3.9 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.3 blocks on 46, 34.2, 79.5 shooting splits. He dunked 7 times. Didn't shoot very well at the rim, but on 161 long twos, he shot 47.5%. And 2.4 assists turnover, 29.9 assist rates with 13.2 turnover rate. And in watching, it's not like all of those assists were, him standing at the top of the key while action is being run. Like, I don't think this is quite like a Jaeger Demon assist rate. Like, he was running action and playing with the ball, excuse me. He was in the 85th percentile on 167 dribble jumpers. There's something here. Now, what I will say is that I don't think he is a point forward in the NBA. But I think he is a more real NBA prospect than point forwards of the past. Was like someone we brought up a little bit earlier in the pod, Jordan Hall, back from St. Joe's. Now, I will say, like, the reason I don't buy him as like a point forward in the NBA is twofold. One, like he's a dribble pull-up merchant. Like, you can't take dribble pull-ups the percentage of times in pick and roll that he does. Like, I would say anecdotally, 40% of his pick and roll possessions end up with him taking a dribble pull up. Like, that's not NBA basketball. He's not that level of dribble pull up shooter, but he can actually dribble. I think he could be used like attacking second side actions pretty well. He's not a very good finisher right now. Like, he is, and again, with the age, you wonder how much better that can get. Like, he is pretty rough getting downhill. He doesn't have great touch. He doesn't have great extension despite being bigger. And he just he will try a lot of different things, but nothing ever seems comfortable. But he, is an okay vertical athlete at least, and he could kind of dribble the ball in transition. Your hope is that this is someone whose game, because he played with the ball so much, he had to make a lot of decisions with the ball. He translates pretty well to kind of like an off-ball offensive role. And I don't hate the defense. Like, the steal and block rates weren't crazy, right? 1.2 block rate, 2.2 steal rate, and even lower in Cal Poly in the Big West, which is like a huge worry, obviously. Like, why was he only having 1.5 steal block rates in the Big West? And he was on bad teams his whole career. Like, he's a very theoretical swing, but he guarded Nate Clifford and didn't just get like cooked every possession. Like, he could, hold up pretty well. He can use his chest. He isn't crazy long, but he will use his length. I just think he's a good basketball player in some ways, and good enough for him to be an actual NBA guy. I don't know, but this is probably a guy I would draft on a 2-way. Like, here's what I'll say. I don't prefer Danny Wolf to him by that much, a little bit, but not like a crazy amount. Like, Stone, am I crazy here? What am I missing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, overall, I ended up with him 53rd on my board as a priority two-way guy, just one spot actually below PV, who we just talked about earlier. I think that he's a better point forward bet than like a Dink Pate, and that's not to throw unnecessary shade at Pate, which I just did, but I think that he's much stronger. Like I think around the rim, just you touched on the extension not being good, but he is like pretty strong. The dribble pull up stuff, like I think a lot of that is interesting touch wise. Like he had a lot of interesting finishes where the touch was pretty good, but I also think a lot of those opportunities were because he's so much of the time was just like 6 inches taller than whoever was trying to defend him, and he could get a shot off a pretty easy looks for himself. So I don't know how much of that is real, and I question, if that isn't NBA trends, if that doesn't translate to a level that is the rate that it was in college, can he score in the NBA? I don't know for sure. But I like the defense, maybe even a little bit more than you. Like I think he's a pretty good defender. Actually, I like the recovery defense a lot. He's super big, and he recognizes things well. So I think he's able to recover and cover ground fairly quickly. On the ball, he's stronger than a lot of guards, and against wings, like I think he held his own pretty well. I'm pretty in on the defense. It's just, does he have the scoring ability to, number one, handle the ball, but also number two, if he isn't handling the ball, be an off ball guy to make the defense worth it. I don't know fully, which is why he's not a firmly draftable guy in every class for me, but this year, obviously he's top 60. So I would take the bet on him. And I think there's some intrigue there.
Absolutely. All right. I have two more guys here, Stone, and then if you have anyone else you want to go quickly with down the stretch, you can. We're only going to go probably about 20, 25 more minutes, but I think these two guys are important to talk about because I think they are probably going to get drafted. How high, I'm not sure, but I think both will get drafted. The first is Jameer Watkins from Florida State. 6'5" without shoes, so 6'6" with a 6'11" and a quarter wingspan. He is like, again, I've said this name a ton this draft cycle, but he is like built measurement wise and physically like like Aaron Nesmith, like 6'6", but strong and really long. He's been in college basketball for 5 years now, but he didn't play for 5 years. He redshirted his sophomore year. I'm guessing there was an injury there. I don't know the full story. But he's a July 6, 2001 birthday, age 23. His rookie season will be his age 24 season. So this is like an ancient dude. But 18.4 points, 5.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.5 blocks on 42.7, 32.1, 74.7 shooting splits. This is a guy that just kind of affects the game in every way. Like that's really what the sell is that this is a wing that has done and can do a little bit of everything. In a 30.3 usage while not being horribly inefficient. Is another guy. His junior year is probably a little better than his senior year, but he gets to the line a ton. Has good steal rates, good block rates for a wing. This year he had a negative assist turnover. Some of that is his team. Like this Florida State team was just awful. They didn't have any spacing. They didn't have anyone else who would do anything or create with the ball. They were just kind of a mess. But in the past, he's at least had 1 year of a solid assist to turnover. He dunks. He finishes at the rim. Okay, not great. He takes a lot of long twos, even if he doesn't take them efficiently. And he took a lot of threes this year, even though he didn't make a ton. He got a lot of flaming bag shots too. He had to take quite a bit of pretty rough shots because again, this team was just in a rough place. The sell here is pretty simple, right? This is a really strong, well-built wing who is just really good defensively. He has really good screen nav. He's really good at using his chest, really reactive. And then offensively, you hope there's just enough there between the shot, which isn't great. It's kind of out in front of his face with a weird kind of elbow twist in. Like as he's shooting, his elbow will move inwards, which I don't love. But he has range. Like he'll take it from fairly far can drive a little bit. He's a good cutter. He's just a good overall athlete. I don't know. I really struggled with Jameer because this feels like the type of guy I should love, and I just never at any point watching him was I like, oh man, this is an NBA player. And I think some of that is Florida State. But Stone, where were you at? What were your kind of thoughts with Jameer here?
Yeah, he is someone I think I wanted to like more than I did. He does have like really good defensive awareness. I think that for me defensively is the biggest sell where he's long against a lot of guards, but I think the awareness is just so good that he's rotationally almost never out of place. Um, Offensively, like the shooting is not as good as I want it to be, considering the fact that he's never shot above 50% from 2 point range throughout his college career. I think he's somewhat contact averse, to be honest. He's super thin. Like just watching him, he's got an incredibly thin frame. I think he plays thin, to be honest. Like I know there's some there's some instances where he looks strong and he punches it down, or he's able to take some bumps as a driver at times. But I think a lot of times, like just contact absorption wise, it's in the air at least, it's pretty bad. I don't know really if he has the frame to add a whole lot either. Like he's got a pretty thin, wiry frame. I don't think there's a lot of room to add a ton of muscle and strength there. Overall, where I ended up with Watkins on my big board was 58. He's like a possible two-way guy for me. I'd maybe consider throwing him a contract. Definitely want him on my summer league team for sure, but I don't know if he. But technically, I mean, in this cycle numerically, I would draft him. So
Yeah, this is a guy. He's at 56 for me. I would definitely get him a two-way. I'd rather get him undrafted. This is a guy who I think the way I put it is he could probably play some NBA minutes like in the regular season, but I don't think he's good enough at anything to actually make him that much of a real prospect. And maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe that is just the context and some of like the weird ball handling stuff he does will look better and real spacing and stuff. But I don't think he's a particularly great advantage creator. As much as I do like the defense, you're right that like for a 24-year-old, he's not just like physically imposing, which is kind of a worry. He's a good athlete, but not like an insane athlete or anything. Like there's a path here to defensive development, and to be honest, is another guy who it's triggering in the back of my brain. Like, is this year's Tamani Kamara, and I'm fucking it up again? And so like I'm trying to tell myself like that is just like that's not a good process, right? Like it's not good to get so locked onto one miss and just tell myself, oh, okay, well it's this guy. I don't think his I think his foot speed is good, but he's just not physically imposing. I think his reaction time is good, but and the screen nav is good, but he's not really going to guard up lineups a ton. Like he's kind of almost more of like a two who should be guarding point guards. And I think he could do that okay, but with the shooting and just kind of the overall offense, I don't think he's like crazy high feel or anything. So I'm not crazy high on Watkins, but I would definitely give him a two-way and just see, because I think at the very least he could play for you like in a pinch. Oh man, our starting shooting guard is down. We just need Jameer to play 10 minutes tonight on this random, Tuesday night, December in Minnesota. Like, Jameer, can you please just do that? Yeah, he probably can. Like, I think that's perfectly reasonable. So, last guy for me here, and this is one that I thought was really, really interesting. And I ended up not being very high on him, but he was a fascinating watch. That's RJ, I think it's RJ Luis is how it's said, from St. John's, Kadari Richmond's teammate. The thing that stands out with Luis the most is that he dunks a ton. He dunked 39 times this year. He's a really, really explosive 2-foot leaper. Caught lobs. He's only 6'5" and a quarter. So he's 6'7" with a 6'10" and a half wingspan. But he's really built like a three. He's super skinny. He's 22 years old. His rookie season will be his age 23 season. So despite being only a junior, he's pretty old. But he averaged 18.2 points, 7.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.4 steals, 0.6 blocks on okay efficiency. A total of 52.5 true shooting. And he's just like really explosive off 2 feet. And had to do a lot for the St. John's team. Their spacing was bad. They were not they ran a lot of really good stuff, but they didn't have a ton of like super high level players offensively. They were a defense first team, and he kind of just had to be like their guy in terms of creation a lot. And I don't think he's actually like a particularly good prospect, but there was a lot of funk there. So Stone, how did you feel about Luis?
Yeah, I think I the way people talked about him, I had higher expectations, to be honest, than what I came out with. He's the big thing is does he provide any value off the ball offensively? Like, I don't think he provides any. He's really stagnant off the ball. He ball watches a lot, doesn't cut really, um, doesn't. He just has no off ball equity whatsoever, in my opinion, and that means the on ball I think has to be better than what it is for me. I think that the ball handling is fine. It's not like uh, it's not to the point he can self create. Really, I think he's going to need a screen a lot of times. I do think he can create enough step backs for himself to create space as a shooter. The shooting track record isn't great, and there are times the touch looked like legitimately awesome this year, and there are other times the touch just looked bad. So I really struggle with the shot and how much to believe in it. To be honest, like that's probably the biggest thing for me is like I wish I could really just buy the shot, and then he would be much more of a guy for me. Um, and I talked about how passive he was off the ball, but I think it almost is just kind of the way he's wired. It feels like where defensively he's also just very passive. He doesn't really provide a lot of help defense. He's not really putting in. I don't know if it's a low motor thing or if it's just he's not wired to really be that kind of guy that is really putting forth extra effort. But it feels like he kind of does a whole lot of nothing when he's not involved in actions and involved in the plays, and that to me is kind of worrisome too, where like if you're gonna be the guy that doesn't try much, at least as a help defender or something, I'd be more interested in him if he at least showed something off the ball offensively. But the fact that that's kind of a through line on both ends of the court for me is more of a concern than it probably should be for someone his age. So overall, I ended up with him 89th on my board as like maybe a guy I would invite to summer league. Wouldn't be a priority guy, but for me, I think it's more likely he ends up. He fits very well to me in the Italian league, in Liga Serie A. That's probably the optimal league for him, in my opinion.
You're such a nerd. Yeah, no, I think the motor is definitely the biggest question here, right? Like there was kind of this big thing, like he got pulled in St. John's last game where they got upset by Arkansas in the tournament. Some of that is he wasn't playing hard enough, and yeah, like he just when he doesn't have the ball, he doesn't play particularly hard, and he's not like a great processor with the ball. I do think that there is a path here for him to just kind of be like a funky scorer. Like he's athletic and he's entirely a 2-foot leaper. He only jumped off one 3 times, and 2 of those dunks he missed. Like what? I shouldn't say only jumped off one 3 times, but he only tried to dunk off 1 foot 3 times, and he missed 2 of them despite being wide open transition ones. So he's the type of athlete that like works way more as an off-ball player and cutter, and then he just doesn't do that a ton. Like he does cut, but he's not like a great cutter or anything. I don't. I wish I latched onto something. If he was either a great shooter or a really solid playmaker, I'd be pretty in on him. Like I just think there is just some real funk as a scorer, but I think he was a lot more of like a flawed scorer that had to lift a team that wasn't a great offense but was a great defense, and that's just diminishing returns in the NBA, right? So you have to kind of change who he is, and he's pretty old to change who he is. But I'd probably give him a 2A. He's at 66 on my board right now. I'd probably give him a 2A just because, again, in a pinch, sometimes you just need a 6'6", 6'7" athletic guy who can kind of do some stuff. And he's a 6'7" athletic guy that can do some stuff. So I'm at least mildly intrigued. Stone, that's all I got. I'm done. I don't have. I've literally talked about everyone I have ranked, all 75 guys. Who do you want to talk about before we get into some predictions?
Yeah, I have like 3 or 4, and I'll just go pretty quick on these guys. There's no need to spend a lot of time, and obviously, if you don't have any notes on them, it'll go extra quick. So, Jalen Leach, another guy from Northwestern, did not think I'd be talking about 2 Northwestern guys this cycle. Uh, he was the primary point guard for them. He gets lost off the ball defensively a lot, especially in switches. That's the big concern for me defensively. Like I don't know if he can exist on that end of the court. But offensively, he's a really quick accelerator. I think he can put rim pressure without needing a screen, which is interesting. And this sort of range that we're talking about as players can make in-air adjustments as a finisher. Has some interesting stuff as a catch and shoot guy, but with the ball in his hands, he's kind of low feel. He's not a very quick processor. And as a ball handler, there's some turnovers where he's just like too busy staring at what he wants to do and dribbles off his foot. Like the role he played at Northwestern is not the role he'll be playing in the NBA if he ever gets the chance. So, but I think that he's just someone I haven't seen really on any boards that I wanted to shout out. He's a possible summer league guy. He's 92nd on my board. Definitely more of an overseas prospect for me, but just didn't see him on any other boards. So worth the mention in my opinion. Another guy on my board I wanted to shout out, Lamont Butler. I kind of like Lamont Butler. I think he's pretty interesting. I think he's a really good point of attack defender, like really, really good. That's really the big sell for him. Is the shot real? I have serious doubts. And if it's not, he's not an NBA player. But the point of attack defense is so good that maybe the shot at 33% is just worth it to be able to get him on an NBA team. Like, I think he is that level of point of attack guy. Problem is, he's most likely a one positional defender, like against most point guards. I don't know if he's big enough to guard a lot of twos. So, I have my concerns there. I ended up with him 59th on my board as a possible two-way guy. So I guess I would technically draft him this year, but I would definitely rather get him as an undrafted guy. Real quick, Clifford Omari. He's pretty interesting. The last top 60 guy on my board that I'll talk about. I know Coop likes him a lot, so shout out to Cooper, who hates us and isn't here to talk about his favorite player. But I think the sell with Omari was the similar one that I used last year with the center that's escaping my name now that was on a two-way with the Spurs, played for Alabama.
Bediako.
Yes, same sell as Bediako, where this is a guy who just does stuff at the rim and can finish as a great dunker. Like, that's really the sell with him. Although I do think Omari is a more versatile finisher than Bediako was, where there's some extension stuff around the rim where he's not just dunking everything. He's really quick leaper, doesn't need a lot of load time off the ground. I think he, around the rim as a shot blocker, tracks things pretty well away from the ball, which is interesting. So he's someone that, I've got some intrigue in from afar. I think on my board, he ended up right above Dylan Cardwell. He actually ended up 48th on my board. So as a priority two-way guy, I would love to get him in undrafted free agency, especially for my Lakers. Pretty interesting prospect there. Final guy I will hit on, and I only wanted to hit on him because I just loved watching him play basketball, is Kai Zegler. I don't think he has a lot of NBA opportunities because of the size. I think he's just a great basketball player. Like this is he's just a ton of fun to watch. My favorite player over the past few years in college basketball, just to watch from a fan perspective, to be honest, but as someone that doesn't love watching college basketball, I think overseas he's going to kill it in some league, whether that's wherever it may be. I think he's going to find a lot of success. He's a great ball handler. I think a really solid shooter. Obviously, I just moved to Tennessee, so I'm trying to peel away any sort of bias or attachment that I may have to being attached to a guy that is played at Tennessee. But I do think that he's just a really fun player. I ended up putting him in my top 100 because I do think there's the slightest of chances if he hits his 100th percentile that he could be someone that maybe plays some minutes in the G League for your G League team. But he's more of a possible summer league guy for my roster, who I think would just be a lot of fun to have on my summer league roster. But I don't know if he'd be able to handle the length there. So not someone I think has an NBA opportunity. More of just a shout out that I really like watching him play basketball. But we can move on to predictive stuff.
All right. We're real sick fucks at this point. This has been almost 3 hours on draft day about undrafted free agents. Let's talk quickly. So the way I want to do this, Stone, is instead of betting against each other like we've done in the past, I want to come to some kind of consensus on what we think might happen with each pick. So you can just kind of nod for now. Coop Flag going to go 1. Dylan Harper going to go 2. Let's talk about 3. Who do you think is going to get drafted here at 3rd?
It depends if the Sixers stay here, right?
So that's absolutely the question. I will say I'll put mine out here first. I think the Sixers do stay here, mostly because I actually don't think they're going to end up having much of a choice. Like I just don't think anyone is going to be dying to trade up to this spot in a way that is worth much. I think actually the biggest that could happen is the Jazz move up for Con Knippel, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think instead the Sixers will end up staying put, and they will draft VJ Edgecombe. That's my prediction here. Stone, what do you kind of think?
If there is a trade of somebody moving up, within the top 5 at least, like I think it might be the Hornets who try to move up for VJ Edgecombe. I could see that happening. I don't know how much value that brings back to the Sixers. If the Sixers stay there, I really am torn. I think it's a coin flip 50-50 between VJ and Con Knippel. I'll, for the sake of consensus, go VJ with you, but I think there's a real chance that if they stay there, Knippel's in play.
I agree that I think 4 then is Knippel, and I think VJ and Knippel are kind of the 3 and 4 right now. Is that kind of what you would agree?
I would agree, yeah.
So interesting. I'm intrigued that we're on the same page there. Stone, you should maybe tweet that we're mock drafting.
Good idea.
Get ahead of it. All right, let's talk about this 5th pick. So Jeremiah Fears has become the betting favorite, which would absolutely break my heart as a Jazz fan. Obviously, in this world, Ace Bailey is still in play. So I do think I'm going to actually put this in. I do think that there's a world of options here for the Jazz. And I think that there is a chance that this is like a potential like trade back, as weird as that sounds, like just where the Jazz are. But I think that the likelihood is if Con is gone, I think this is probably Ace Bailey. I don't think, the more I've heard and seen, I don't think he slips much past this. Does that sound right to you, or kind of where is your head at with this pick?
This pick has been really tough for me. I think it's it's a 3-way split for me here between Ace Bailey, Trey Johnson, and Fears. I think it's one of those 3 that ends up as a Utah Jazz, and I don't know which one.
Man, that is an absolute nightmare, isn't it? So I will say, so on the Fears front, I do think there's a little bit of smoke here with Fears. I think he's actually the least likely of those 3 guys you said. And I think that while Lito says it's going to be Fears, I think that there's a lot of things pointing to that. But I do think this new Jazz ownership, I think is maybe using that to or not ownership, but this new Jazz leadership, I think is trying to use that to maybe drum up some interest in this, because I think a lot of teams that were in like the 8 to 10 range maybe fell in love a little bit with Fears and the potential Fears fit, and are now a little bit panicked that this is going to happen. I personally think that the Jazz are pretty invested in Collier. Because I will say, even though Austin H is new, let's not pretend like he doesn't know his dad's opinion on everything, right? And that this is going to be some wild thing here. I also do think there's a world that ace falls quite a bit farther than this. And Philip Flores asked about queen. We will get there, but so lock it in a little bit. Where is your hat at with this fifth pick? I think you've actually kind of talked me in a little bit, maybe to Trey Johnson here. But
Yeah, if Fears is the least likely, I think the ace dropping stuff is pretty real, to be honest. And I think we see him drop out at the top 5. I would go Trey Johnson here for if we have to meet the middle on a consensus. I think I would more so go with Trey over ace here.
I'll go with Trey with you. We'll probably only go through the lottery, maybe the top 20, because I do have to go in like 10 minutes. But
No worries.
But 6th pick then, Wizards. Is this where Ace Bailey gets picked, or what's the move here with the Wizards?
I think this is where the range for Ace really, really starts. So I would say Ace is interesting here. I think we could see Fears here again. And the sort of dark horse that I would throw out there would be maybe Noah Asenge. Not to harp too much on all the French stuff that the Wizards are doing, but he seems like the kind of toolsy sort of wing that could maybe do a lot of different stuff that they like to bet on. So I think those are probably the 3 most likely options, and maybe you can convince me on one of them.
I had a pretty strong belief about a week ago that this was going to be a Song game. And I still think that's possible. I think the Wizards have maybe tried to pull a Hornets and try to keep that out of the media's ear for a while. But I also think it could really be Fears. I actually think it's pretty unlikely that it's Ace Bailey at 6. And the main reason is that I think the Wizards are a team that is more susceptible than a lot of teams to just not taking someone that straight up doesn't want to be there. I just think that's not that the Wizards are a team that are more in tune with that thing than a lot of teams. So to me, it's between Fears and Assange here. My worry with putting Assange here is that a lot of other players, there's a chance that he falls farther than any of these other guys. But I also think this is the top end of his range. I don't think there's any way Assange goes above this. So I kind of lean Assange, but I would listen on Fears too. So what do you think? What do you want to lock in here at 6?
I think we should go with Fears because I think the way the Wizards would perceive it is that he's the biggest star bet available, and they didn't have an opportunity to really get one in this class, and probably at the level that they had hoped. So still taking a star swing from their perspective, I think is the move they'd want to make.
Absolutely. I think that's fair. This 7th pick for me has been the same guy for a while, and it doesn't change even with some followers. To me, this is Colin Wallach. I think the Pelicans, I think, for whatever reason, seem kind of locked into him at 7 and have seemed pretty interested for a while. Does that sound right to you, Stone, or do you think this is a spot for Ace Bailey?
I think this might be an Ace Bailey spot. I think this is the kind of star from their perspective again, a star swing that can maybe be the smoothest transition for them out of Zion that they might be able to try and pivot from. And
my pushback is that I don't think the Pelicans have any desire to move on from Zion.
But if they don't,
I think this move with Poole points even more to they want like a Maltlock, because they want someone who can come in and actually play defense and be like a role man here. And I know it's chalk, but I really do feel like this has been locked in for a while for a reason, to the extent that I actually could see them moving up to make sure they get Maltlock in case the Wizards are they want him. This is the one I will fight for the most. And also because I think with Bailey's maneuverings, either of these next 2 teams make a lot more sense for him.
Gotcha.
So that would be
we'll go with, if you feel that strongly, we'll go with Maltlock. I guess it really depends on how strongly do you think the Pelicans view Missy. And I don't know how strongly they view him. I don't view him that strongly, but we'll go with Maltlock here.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. All right, 8th pick. This is where I think that the Nets take Ace Bailey. What do you think? Is there someone else that you think is really in play, or does this seem about right to take this star swing and for a team like the Nets where they can promise him, hey, you can be the guy for at least a little bit of time here.
They did it with Cam Thomas, so maybe they do it with Ace. They have so many picks now, though.
You also got to realize too that the Nets want to be awful next year because next year is the last year they have full control of their pick.
Let's go Ace.
Then they will have a ton of cap space after having a potentially high pick. All right, 9th pick, the Raptors. I feel like this is where things really, really open up. I have very little feel here. I kind of lean Asonge, but I also understand this is a weird pick. I think this could be Jaeger Demon. So Lito mentions that he's heard the Nets are interested in Asonge and Demon. I think those are both true, but I also think that I don't think Ace Bailey will get past now. I think this is the floor for Ace, and I think Noah and Demon both have lower floors. But who stays out to you here, Stone?
I'm not positive the Raptors pick here, to be honest. I think the Raptors might be so enamored with Malawach that they try and move up. If they don't, I think the two names that stand out to me, because Masai just cannot help himself because he's a sick man, I think would be Asonge, or I think this is where Banjay's draft stock starts.
Oh wow, interesting. I this feels a little high for Banjay, but I'm with you on Asonge being a real possibility here, and I'm willing to lock him in. I think that makes a lot of sense for this team. But yeah, I do think this is a potential trade chip. I don't think the Raptors are particularly interested in taking a guy here they want to play much. And I think that even points again to Asonge. Like they might just say, hey, we're going to take this guy at 9 and have him play a ton in the G League. Like he needs time. And, they want to play the Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Pertl group as much as possible. So that's I'm with Asonge here. I think that's a solid pick. At 10, the Suns, obviously the newest members of this realm. I think this is an interesting one because I think the Suns will be wanting to take someone who is quote unquote ready to contribute and help them win. So who stands out to you here? Because I have one name that I think really pops to me.
There's 4 names for me, but I'll go through them. Murray Boyles, Derek Queen, Thomas Sorber, and hashtag sources. I've heard there's intrigue there with Danny Wolf for the Phoenix Suns, and I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest. Like this is, it feels like it would be such a Suns move they need a center, and they take the worst possible center for that roster. And it would just be very Sunsy. And he's a guy that contributes right away in terms of the perceived notion. So those would be probably the 4 names that I think.
Wolf is fascinating. See, I was going to throw a completely different one out here. I think that this is a place where a team might reach for Cedric Coward for like an immediate guy, but maybe they finally decided they do have too many shooting guards. For what it's worth, I'm with you. If you think that that Danny Wolf is really in play here, I say fuck it. Let's do it. Danny Wolf at 10. We're probably only gonna be able to get through the lottery. Let's go 11 here. The Blazers. I've heard Cedric Coward here. Keep him in the Pacific Northwest. I've heard Carter Bryant. I think this is a team that will go with a forward type guy after trading for Drew. I don't think they want another guard. They could potentially go for another big, but I'd be a little surprised. I think this is one of it's Coward. It's maybe you could squint and see Colin Murray Boyles. It could be Carter Bryant. This could be Jaeger Demon. I think Demon actually makes a lot of sense with this team. Not that I would like that pick, but who stands out to you here of those names?
It's got to be someone that Schmidt saw in high school, right? It's between Coward and Carter for me, but I think it'd probably be Coward Bryant. I think it's probably Bryant.
I'm with you. Carter Bryant. All right, 12th pick. We got to go a little quick here. Who do you got at 12 for the Bulls.
I hate to do this to them, but it's such a Bulls pick to take Demeen here.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think it. I don't think it will be Demeen because I think they're a little bit too focused on fit, and I don't think they will want to put Demeen with Josh Giddey. I think this could be like Thomas Sorber is maybe a slight reach. I think this is Carter Bryant. I think they have proven they love, or we took Carter Bryant. I think this is Cedric Coward then. Excuse me, I think Coward and Bryant will go 11, 12 because I think that they love their long wing bets. And they've proven that before. I think Carter Bryant is more of a Bulls pick than Coward, but I still think Coward could go here. Obviously, some guys are really falling now. 13 with the Hawks. Now they are in a really interesting spot. Tell me who you think here.
It is really interesting. I think it's between two guys. I think it's between three guys. I think it's Neat Clifford, Asa Newell, or Yakachonis here. I think it's one of those three.
Yeah, I think this probably is Yakachonis just to see if they can get a backup point guard who can also shoot. This is a team that has a lot of defense on the wing now and does not have a lot of shooting. I don't think Clifford will go this high. I think he's actually going to end up falling a little bit to the late teens. I don't think this is a team that would move on Queen or anything like that. I think Queen has pissed a lot of NBA teams off with a combine performance that bad. And so that's leading to the fall here. I'll say Kasparis Yakachonis with you. Last one here. We are right here at the end. Who do you got going with the last pick in the lottery to the San Antonio Spurs?
Yeah, and real quick for what it's worth, it sounds like the Hawks are pretty in Carter Bryant, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do a little maneuver up in the lottery to get him. For the Spurs, I think it's between Coward and
well, now Coward's gone, so
yeah.
I don't think this is a team that'll take Queen, so I do think that makes things really interesting.
Is this the Baron J spot?
This could be the Baron J spot. I think this is the Jaeger Devin spot. I think that even if it's not the Spurs, because I think the Spurs could take Devin,
I think they trade out,
move him away,
yeah.
But because they already are going to take Harper, but I think that this is where Devin goes. End of the lottery. It could be 13 as well. I could see the Hawks taking Devin. But I think the Spurs clearly value this type of player, and they trust that they can teach guys to shoot. And obviously his shot is less broken than like a Jeremy Sohan. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. This will be out as a pod soon. I do have to get going. Obviously, yeah, Queen and Colin Murray Boyles fall out of our lottery here, which is a fascinating one.
Murray Boyles goes there. He's too. One team is too analytically, possessed to let him fall out of the lottery.
Potentially. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft Show. Make sure you tune in tonight for the live show during the draft. We'll see you all then. Have a great rest of your day.